For our final panel discussion today, we're going to explore the more traditional career path in academia and how to land a faculty job. I think you'll find, though, by hearing from the different experiences of our fourth panelists here, that there's actually quite a range of experiences and different types of faculty positions that one can have, from the more traditional big universities to smaller colleges that conduct, that have different roles for faculty and different mixes between research, teaching, and administrative positions. So let's get started. What I'll ask our panelists to do, as before, is to introduce themselves, talk about their career path, and a little bit of what their day-to-day life is like as a faculty member. Chris, how about we start with you?
Sure. So I'm Chris Herdman. I'm assistant professor at Middlebury College in Vermont. And so I've been in my current position for 2 years. And so how I ended up in my current position is while I was working on my PhD research, I enjoyed my research and I wanted to pursue a research career, but I also really had enjoyed the teaching that I had been able to do. So I was a teaching assistant a couple of times as a graduate student, and I had enjoyed that, even though I had to focus on my research. And so in thinking about my career trajectory, my understanding at the time, which I think is similar to my understanding now, is that that a stereotypical academic path at research universities made it challenging to pursue teaching as one of the main focuses of your career pursuit, because often there's a lot of focus on research and pressure on the research side as well. But I was aware, so many of you may not be aware of the concept of a liberal arts college. It seems to be it's very common in the States, but less common in Canada or elsewhere. And liberal arts colleges are undergraduate-only 4-year bachelor's institutions. They tend to be small. Middlebury College is about 2,500 students. We get really talented students, similar to, say, University of Waterloo, and many go on to graduate schools and PhD programs and things like that. But it's a very different environment, both for the student and as well as for the faculty member. So in my teaching, currently my classes, I've only been there 2 years, but have ranged from the biggest class, I think it was maybe 23 students, and the smallest class was 3 students. So it's a very different teaching environment for myself. But I was aware of these sorts of institutions, and I knew that they, while research was an important part of a position at these sorts of liberal arts colleges, teaching was very highly valued and essential, both teaching experience as well as developing teaching as a faculty member. And so I had a few postdoc positions, but I went out of my way to get teaching experience along the way while I was doing my research. And that, I think, is what led me to sort of be able to get a position that at such an institution, because teaching, I think, was an essential part of the hiring process. And so I had some teaching experience on the side of postdocs. Most recently, I did a postdoc here at IQC in Waterloo, and so I was able to teach a class at University of Waterloo as well as previously. So I can give a perspective from somebody who's sort of pursued a career where I do research. I do research with undergraduates as well as external collaborators. My research is computationally focused in condensed matter and quantum information. So it's a field which I can work with undergraduates and work with external collaborators, and I don't need a team of graduate students and postdocs to make progress. So certainly some research fields don't work very well in an environment at an institution like a liberal arts college. But many research fields do, especially tabletop experimental physics or computationally oriented research. But I can certainly provide that perspective from this sort of institution, which is very different from a large research university environment, both for the faculty side and faculty positions, and also in terms of how you pursue that career path. So.
Sounds good. Rowan.
My name's Rowan Thompson. I'm an associate professor and Canada Research Chair at Carleton University in Ottawa. So I did a PhD here at Perimeter and Waterloo in superstring theory. I finished in 2007, and this is my first time back, so it's a lot of fun. Partway through my PhD, I started to think, what should I do next? The PhD went really well. In 4 years, I had 7 papers, including 2 in physical review letters. But I looked around, and frankly, it was mostly men, and they were doing lots of postdocs before getting a permanent job. So I started to say, how does this work out if I want to have a kid someday? How do I juggle all of this? So I started considering different options and exploring different things to do. And a friend of mine who was working in medical physics said, you know, you should go talk to someone named Dave Rogers at Carleton University. He's a very senior member of the department there, but he's new. And it turned out I had a beer with my first-year physics professor when I was home for Christmas in Ottawa. And he said, you should go talk to someone named Dave Rogers, who's new at Carleton. So I sent Professor Rogers at that point an email and went to chat with him. He made sort of 30 minutes to talk to me about the field in general. And a few days later, this was nearing the end of my PhD studies, he sent me a job offer for a postdoc. So I did some soul searching, but I knew there were more job opportunities in medical physics. But this way, I still got to do physics and research. And I was very happy to go home to Ottawa, where there's great skiing. So I took the job offer and went. And you may say, oh, well, you're a professor at Carleton, so that must have been very straightforward. It wasn't. So a couple years into the postdoc, I started to think, well, what's next? Another postdoc, because usually you don't get a professor job with just one. The hospital in Ottawa, the Cancer Center, was working very hard to recruit me there. They have about 20 PhD physicists. And they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I moved to the Cancer Center. And my postdoc advisor said, you have a very nice fellowship right now. Ask for a leave of absence for 6 months. You might not like it. And I said, OK, I'll ask for the leave of absence, but I'm definitely going to like this, and I'm going for it. I went to the Cancer Center, and it was not the right fit. I missed research too much. I didn't like the way that sort of workspace operated. It just wasn't for me. Though I have grad students now who have jobs there, and they love it. So this is a personal thing. So I went back to my postdoc. I heeded the advice of the wiser generation above me. And I continued on the postdoc. I applied for a job at Carleton, which came up in the following 6 months. I did not get it. Then I did a lot more soul searching because I wondered if I'd made all the wrong choices. I had someone tell me, I'm watching your career go down in flames. But I ignored that. And there were 2 other faculty tenure track jobs advertised in Canada that year, one at McGill and one at UVic. I put in applications at both. I interviewed at both, and I got offered both jobs. And so I went, yes. And then Carleton offered me a job, and I was faced with a decision, and I decided to stay in Ottawa. So that's how I ended up as an assistant professor at Carleton. So then I had all the fun of starting up a career, which we'll probably talk about in a bit. So that was in 2010 that I started there. And in 2013, I became a Canada Research Chair and also had a baby. So it was a good year.
Awesome. Wow. Alex.
Hello, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. I was here for the PSI program in 2012 to 2013. And it was a great program, but I think the hardest part about it is that it's only a year. So as soon as you start, you kind of already have to start thinking about what are you going to do next, because you have to start applying for positions for next year. And I wasn't really set even at that point that I wanted to continue into a PhD, and I was actually considering applying to Teachers College because I really thought that teaching would be a really great fit for me, and I had a passion for teaching and education. But I did end up doing the PhD because I got involved with a research project that I really liked and an advisor that I really liked as well, Matthew Johnson, unfortunately not here today. So I continued on to the PhD, and I still wasn't convinced that I wanted to do research as a career. I couldn't see myself committing to that. I enjoyed it, but I didn't have that passion that would be required to go through the whole process of jumping around to different postdocs to try to obtain that tenure track position. So I did my PhD. I was based at York University, but I also worked jointly here. And I guess, midway through the PhD, I'm, becoming more and more convinced that, research is really not for me. I do want to try to teach full-time if I can after the PhD. So I started looking for more teaching positions in addition to just being a TA and, running the labs at the university as a graduate student. Not running, but overseeing some components of physics labs. So as we've heard today, it's really important just to talk to people. So I started just talking to people and seeing where those conversations led. Talk to the person on the GO train. Seriously, a person on the GO train actually led me to get a job at Seneca College. So I was able to teach a college physics course there part-time in my third year of my PhD. And I kept talking to people who were in full-time teaching positions at universities. And it turns out there was someone at York University who was, a full-time lecturer, but he was also interested in physics education research. So I started talking to him about that, and I got involved in some physics education research projects, which led to a couple papers as well. And most of these conversations are just, talking to people in positions that you think you could see yourself, asking for advice, asking what it's like. But then some of them even, similar to Rowan, magically lead to job offers. So someone was looking for someone to come start teaching a course in September, once again part-time. So this would be in the final year of my PhD. I was able to teach one course part-time, and at this institution I currently work full-time, a full-time faculty teaching position. So this is Minerva Schools at KGI, and it's a new institution, and I don't want to spend the whole time talking about Minerva, but I should tell you just a little bit about it just to give you a sense for what I do. It's kind of like a startup university. We actually just had our first graduating class last week. So it's really new, and it's actually a liberal arts college based in the US, but it's really reinventing higher education. So there's a few interesting things about it. The first is that there's a focus in global education. So we want all of our students to experience different cultures in different parts of the world. So they spend their first year in San Francisco in the US, but after that they travel to 6 other cities throughout the world that are pre-designated cities, and they'll travel together, so they still live together. There is a whole student experience team with them to ensure that they're having meaningful experiences in the city. But us faculty are distributed all over the world, and we can live wherever I want, and I actually work from home. And to have class, we have a really cool technology that enables us to have interactive online classes. So imagine like 15-way Skype, but with classroom features. So with whiteboards and collaborative document editing, collaborative coding, breakout groups, hand raises, anything you would want in a classroom. So it's been really cool to be a part of this. And I'll just mention the other interesting thing that we do is our pedagogy. So we really try to maximize student engagement in their learning. So for this reason, there are no lectures whatsoever. The saying is that lecturing is a great way to teach, but not the best way to learn. So instead, we have more of a flipped classroom style approach in which students work through a study guide before class with readings and practice problems, and they're expected to come to class prepared to talk about the material and to work on more advanced problems together as a class. So in terms of physics, we don't have that many physics courses, not as many as universities that you're used to. We only have maybe 4 physics classes. But surprisingly, we have a high proportion of physics faculty because, as we've seen today, physicists are diverse, and we can teach more than just physics. So I teach physics, but I also teach statistics and programming and logic and even game theory and decision theory. And our students can graduate with natural sciences degrees or social sciences or even arts and humanities or business. And I can say that now that we do have graduates, some of them are going to grad school in physics. So I'll close it there. And if you want to know more about Minerva, just find me later and I'll tell you more about how we assess students and other interesting things.
Awesome, thank you. Alioscia?
My name is Alioscia Hamma. I do research in quantum information mainly. I did a couple of postdocs, the first one at University of Southern California, the second one at MIT. And then I had a 5-year position here at Perimeter Institute, which was a great period. I had fun, it was nice. Then I suddenly realized that maybe after 80 years of being, a postdoc of some sorts, maybe I should find a faculty job. And I did after many failed attempts, which explains why I'm here. So I can tell you about the failed attempts. So I got this faculty position at Tsinghua University in Beijing, where I stayed almost 4 years. And then I went to the University of Massachusetts, Boston, where I am associate professor. And I spend my time, as you know, so 1/3 of my time I do research, 1/3 of my time I try to teach some physics to our kids, and the other 1/3 of my time I hide from paperwork. So it takes me more time to hide from it than actually do it. And, but yeah, I am that bad. So.
Awesome. Okay, again, throughout our sessions, we'll take questions from you. So feel free to just put your hand up or seek out the floating mic. But maybe we'll sort of build on what you were just saying. There's the story of a third, a third, a third. Maybe Rowan, would you feel like, especially for young faculty, that's how that works out? What is life really like when you first start out well, I'll have you build on that too. Sure.
Okay, so Carleton University is a lot like University of Waterloo in that it's research and teaching, and we value both. So nominally, I think when I started, it was supposed to be 40% teaching, 40% research, and 20% admin. Of course, no one counts the hours that you put in. So when you first start out, you have to teach new classes that you've never taught before, you've never taught on your own. If you're lucky, you've recruited a grad student already, so you're recruiting a grad student, you need to give them a project to do or help define a project for them. You need to apply for grants so that you can pay the grad student when your startup money runs out. And then you'll also be doing some committee work, admin in the department, so serving on thesis defenses, and you'll be assigned working on committees. So I think in my first year, I was on recruitment, retention, and outreach, which does all sorts of things. I was also on the curriculum committee, so reviewing the curriculum in our program. So it's a big juggling act. When you first start, I remember it being very exhilarating and exciting. I felt a lot of the time like I was flying by the seat of my pants, but it was also a lot of fun. So I think some people over-prepare for lectures. I think you need to just know your stuff and then go in there and engage with the students. And you have to be efficient with your time and focus. So choose to have things not take too long and figure out which things really do have to take a lot of time. So that first discovery grant application here in Canada is really important, so that needs to be done very well.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I wish you told me, because when I joined UMass Boston, I said to the chair, because I wanted to be real nice, and because I respect hierarchy, I'm the new kid, right? So I said, please give me the courses nobody wants to teach. And it was not a wise thing to do, yeah. There is a reason why nobody wants to teach. So that's a very valuable piece of information you gave, to choose carefully within possibility what you can teach and how to prepare for that. Yeah.
Chris, what about you? At a place that probably emphasizes more the teaching, how do you balance that with your own research at a institution?
Yeah, so I'm only in my second year, so I haven't had to put much time into the service side. That will come in a little bit later, perhaps next year or the following years. So I've been able to focus more on the teaching and research early on. Certainly the first 2 years during the semesters, so I'm actually in the class teaching 6 months of the year, and then a few weeks on either end preparing and grading and so on. But then the rest of the year can be focused on research. And certainly the first pass through the courses, I definitely had to put a lot of emphasis on prepping the classes. So I was spending, large majority of my time in terms of each semester prepping the courses the first time. And I've had the chance to repeat courses now, and so that's been a bit less of a time commitment, but certainly we have certainly a higher teaching load. So I teach 2 courses a semester. So we have 2 semesters. So I am generally speaking teaching 2 courses in the fall and 2 courses in the spring is my and that's sort of essentially the standard teaching load that. And so that definitely keeps me busy during the time. But I think the more as I develop courses, I expect to be able to carve out more time during the semester. But then in the summer and in our winter break. Is a time when I can focus primarily just on research. So,
awesome. Alex, are there people, or do you pursue research, or are there people at Minerva that also find time for that?
It's not common yet, so no faculty are, well, I shouldn't say no, but very few faculty at Minerva are pursuing research in their fields. But I think that moving forward, we are, because it's a brand new institution, we're still kind of designing policies around this. So I think that moving forward, we're thinking of how faculty can keep pursuing their research. We do have summers off, so some faculty are getting back into their research over the summer, or they have external grants, which allows them to do some research throughout the semester. But the full-time teaching load for me is 4 courses per semester, but this past year I was just doing 3 courses per semester and then having that other time being spent on, I guess what you might call service, but it was mostly curriculum development, so designing courses and also working with faculty. We want to keep class sizes very small, so this means that multiple faculty are teaching the same class. So for one of those classes, I was the head instructor, which meant coordinating with the other faculty teaching that class to make sure that we're approaching it consistently, that we're all on the same page, how we're delivering the lesson plans, how we're grading the assignments, and stuff like that. And I guess the other part of service for me meant managing students. So it wasn't managing research projects, but it was managing peer tutors that were running some programming sessions, managing other students who were working as academic assistants and other types of interns at Minerva.
Sounds great. I think as students and postdocs, we often feel we know sort of what faculty life is going to be like because we interact with, our supervisors. Was there any surprises when you became a faculty member, things that you weren't expecting? Rowan, maybe, do you have anything?
How much fun it is?
How much fun? Oh, good.
So, when I first started, I had to teach 3 courses a year. When I became a Canada Research Chair, that went down to 2. But I've always found a big connection between research and teaching, so I try to tell my undergrads or grad students about my research. And it's a lot of fun. They love it. It's people are engaged in what they're doing, and it's a lot of fun. So that was surprising.
Any other comments? No? Questions from the guys? All right. Well, we've touched on this a little bit already. Some of you mentioned, but what are some of the skills that maybe you didn't get as a student, as a postdoc, that you had to develop as a faculty member that maybe you weren't prepared for, because we don't teach people how to teach and we don't teach people how to do service? Is there any things that you guys felt that you had to work on?
Well, I will just say what I mentioned before is that if I did a PhD and then I did postdocs, and if I had just done that trajectory, I would have, the only teaching experience I would have had when I was applying for faculty positions would have been a few TA experience doing some TAing, and that's not sufficient teaching experience for the sorts of positions I was interested in. And frankly, there's from my experience, there's a big difference between being a teaching assistant and actually being the primary instructor for a course where you're designing the course and all the aspects of it. So this traditional route wouldn't have gotten me the teaching experience I needed. And so what I did is I, on the side, requested to teach actually I taught a course right after I'd finished my PhD at Berkeley. Before I filed my thesis, I asked the department if when I finished, could I teach a course? And they basically said, sure, go ahead, teach Physics 101. And I did that, taught a classroom of 120 students, basically had taught before other than being a teaching assistant. And then actually at University of Waterloo, I was able to request to teach a course, so I taught a course here. So I did have to go out of my way to get that experience as an instructor, which I think was essential. But the traditional route would have just prepared me for the research side, would not have prepared me for having that teaching experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to echo that. I wasn't too happy with the teaching experiences I was getting just as a TA, as a grad student. So I think seeking out these other opportunities is so important if you do want to pursue that. And just remembering that, hopefully your PhD supervisor is on board with you doing that while you are doing your PhD. But even just outside of teaching, I think there's still a lot of learning on the fly to be done when you transition out of being a graduate student. You're not just a teacher, you're also a role model, a mentor, an advisor, a manager. So those things kind of caught me off guard as a surprise that I had to learn how to adapt to. And maybe another skill that has been mentioned throughout the day is project management and people management. So you have to be able to keep track of what your team is doing, be able to run effective meetings, plan the agenda, think of action items, things that I never crossed my mind as a graduate student.
Good. Let's turn now maybe to finding a job. Alioscia, you mentioned that you had some failed experiences, and did you want to comment a little bit on writing a good research statement? How do you eventually cross the Rubicon and get that job?
I have some notes.
Okay.
I don't remember all of it by heart. It's a lot of stuff. Okay, so what is it? Okay, so you want me to start from the research statement?
Sure.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I need to translate some words from course language. Okay, so research statement is in fact important. Mm-hmm. And no, because I was told, it's not, it's not that important. Yeah, make it okay, but no, it's actually very important because research statements are very boring. And I know it also from being on the other side. So when I was here at TPI, I was helping out reaching research statements for the postdoc applicants. And now I have to do it in the other places where I've been exposed to hundreds of them. And they were all the same. And also mine was all the same, like theirs. And that's really hard. It's really hard for anyone who is on the other side to select anybody based on that. But so this means that if you do some work on your research statement that makes it a little bit more engaging, then actually that's a very good thing to do. And the three things that I wrote here about the research statement I think are important is that one should really try to tell a story and explain what is that you are doing. And usually one writes a research statement in a way that is kind of, okay, let me show my muscles, right? Let me show how sophisticated and hard is the stuff that I'm doing, with the result that anyone else that is not doing exactly that thing will not understand that. So, okay, yeah, then you're a strong candidate like anyone else. But I'm actually really impressed when I read a research statement and I understand something. So, in general, never underestimate the pleasure that other people get from understanding what you're saying. Okay? So, when you give a talk, a presentation, a lecture, they, even when you tell them something that they know very well, they like it because they understand it, and that's very important. The second thing is the course language here. So don't try to say things that are not actually true or that are hyped. So this is a bad habit that we have in physics community, to do hyping. And I don't think it works on a research statement. Everyone who is on the other side is not impressed by that and reads overhyped statements all the time. I wouldn't do that. I did that. Now I wouldn't do that. And the third thing that I also didn't do was that somehow the research statement, so it would be good to get some practice and to mentored by somebody that is more experienced than you in understanding how to write a grant proposal. And if your research statement kind of shows that you know how to write a grant proposal because it kind of resembles that type of structure, that's also something that works. Okay, so this is a research statement. Then I have all the other stuff, but I'll leave it for the next question.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. Rowan, did you want to comment at all?
Yeah, I agree completely. So I've been on faculty since 2010, which surprises me still. But I've been on 4 or 5 hiring committees now at faculty in math and physics for the Dean of Science. And the research statement is really important, and you have to realize these are committees made up of different flavors of physicists and maybe also mathematicians or biologists, because often there's a requirement to have someone from outside your department. So it should be accessible and tell a story. So what have you done? What are you doing? And where do you want to go? But do it in 2 pages kind of thing. But in addition to that, you want to have a cover letter. That cover letter should be like an introduction. Hi, I'm so-and-so, and here's who I am. And that should make me and the people on the hiring committee want to read your research statement in detail so that we understand it. And you also typically need to have a teaching statement at many university jobs.
Yeah, maybe do you want to share a little bit, or do you guys want to share a little bit about a teaching statement that you might prepare for an application?
Did you have to prepare one?
Yeah, so so actually one general comment I'll make is definitely keep in mind the nature of the institution you're applying to. There are a range of academic institutions and a range of faculty positions that's within those institutions. And I actually haven't been on a hiring committee, so I can't actually speak from firsthand experience in terms of reading applications yet. But I would imagine, for example, my department, I would imagine that we historically and probably will in the future get applications for people applying to research universities, and they don't make a distinction. And things both with the research statement and the teaching statement, as well as other parts of the application, the cover letter as well, definitely need to reflect the nature of the institution. So in my department, there are 9 tenure track faculty in the physics department, or tenured or tenure track, and we basically are all in different subfields. And so, when I was applying, there was pretty much nobody who was expert in my subfield, and so. Keeping that in mind, whereas maybe at a large research university, maybe there's the committee, there's multiple people who are in a subfield that they're hiring in, you have to keep in mind the audience. And also, in an undergraduate-focused institution, your research statement as well as your cover letter need to reflect the fact that you're going to be doing research with undergraduates. So that's something to keep in mind is if it's an institution where you'll have lots of grad students, then you should reflect that. If it's an institution where you'll be working with undergraduates, should reflect that. And then in particular, in my case, if it's an institution that really has a strong commitment to the teaching side, that needs to be reflected in the cover letter as well as the teaching statement. And that's something, that was a message that a friend of mine who's also at a similar position in another liberal arts college gave to me, and that it really, the cover letter really needed to demonstrate that I understand the nature of the institution I'm applying to, I understand your department, and this is the way I'm going to contribute. And in particular, in the case of similar sorts of liberal arts colleges, it had to display not only am I interested in research, but I'm really committed to teaching undergraduates, and that had to be apparent in the cover letter, as well as the teaching statement. So I think in our, I imagine, I can't say from, like I said, from being on a committee, but I'm pretty certain that the teaching statement definitely had to reflect the fact that teaching was one of my passions and one of my career focuses as well.
What about, especially maybe if someone is considering maybe the non-traditional path, Alex, how do you build, say, a network, or how do you find these kinds of positions that are a little bit outside of the traditional role?
I think I was kind of describing this when I was describing my pathway here, and as was mentioned many times throughout the day, is trying to talk to people who are in positions that you could see yourself doing. This could be lecture positions at your current university. This could be, as I said, maybe the person on the GO train who works at Seneca College, and just don't close any doors. Keep all of these options open. It could also be making the most of conferences that you go to, talking to people there, asking them what they like about their job, what they don't like about the job, their pathway to the job, and just gathering as much information as you can is always helpful. And sometimes it leads to opportunities for yourself to add to your teaching experience.
Sounds good. Any questions from the audience? Yeah? Can we get the microphone tossed over?
Here, do you mind just
Everyone's so gentle. Yes.
A question related to writing research proposals and research statements and so on. Clearly, people in this traditional path in academia go through this process where, as graduate students, they first learn in depth about a particular field and start dabbling into, particular projects, maybe culminating in a thesis, and eventually formulating their own research program and things they're interested in, which is, as someone said earlier today, is almost entrepreneurial, where you have to really believe in that research program and you have to apply for funding and so on. So could you reflect on that process for you? How did you go from first learning about something to eventually having a clear picture of what you want to do as a researcher, and maybe some milestones in that process throughout?
Sounds good. Who wants to?
Was that directed at someone?
Anyone?
You go first.
I'd say it's a winding path, and you have to find your way. So things change with time. So often you'll start working on things that you know. So for example, from a postdoc, you're working on something, but then you come up with a new idea, and so you take it in a different direction, or you leap over here. So for me, I do Monte Carlo simulations of the interactions of radiation with matter. So I apply this to cancer treatments. So I collaborate with people in cancer centers, physicians, medical physicists. But I also look at multi-scale modeling. How do we model electrons interacting with DNA to understand biological damage and biological response to radiation? And my background as a theorist is ideally suited to that, because I'm really happy to do quantum scattering theory, multiple scattering theory, and simulate this. So this is a great problem. But it sort of emerges organically in a way. It just grows. So I find one thing leads to another. And when you're maybe at your stage, you can't see where it's going to go. But maybe when you're more at mine, you can look back And you can say, oh, look at all these little pieces coming together.
Yeah, I want to add something. So, you know, when you are a postdoc and there is, at some point you're freaking out, right? Because you know you need to build a CV and be applying for a faculty position. And more or less consciously, the reason why you follow some line of research is because you know to do that and because it's hot. So you know it is publishable, you will get attention, and at some point that kind of becomes the main reason, the driving force. Of course, you also enjoy doing that, but you would enjoy doing anything anyway because you're a physicist and all physics is beautiful, right? So you follow that particular line because it gathers attention. It's some successful line of research, and that's fine. Unfortunately, when you write a research statement, that is not good enough. So it's not good enough to say, you know, you should hire me because I work on cool stuff, and it's cool because other people say it's cool. So at that point, when you write a research statement, you are confronted with this question, which is, why am I doing this? Why this is actually interesting? Why this is a real problem? I know other people that are famous say that, but why really it's interesting? And when you actually seriously address this question that you ask to yourself and try to answer this question, first of all, you find your new line of research, which is great because you need one. And second, you are able to write that story that makes your case.
Thank you.
Maybe shifting on now from, let's say we've gotten into the interview stage, what are some things that either you should always do or things you should never do when you get to that point in the application process? Alioscia, did you have anything?
I like speaking after Rowan. Okay. It's working for me.
Sounds good.
So there are lots of things you should do and lots of things you shouldn't do. So you should, and some of them have been touched on earlier today in different contexts. You should do research about the place that you're going to interview at, because we actually want to know that you do want to come to us. You know, so typically for a faculty position, we'll interview 3 to 5 candidates. So if you're on the short list, you've got a pretty good shot at getting that job. So by researching the institution, I mean, look at what types of degrees are offered. Think about what courses you would be comfortable teaching. Are there courses you would not be comfortable teaching? How do you envision supervising graduate students and getting your research program that's independent, off the ground? Have you thought about these things? How would you go about getting grants? Do you have any idea about working on committees? So you should do research ahead of time. And then you should come and be prepared to be asked questions for at least a day straight, if not 2 days straight, because these are grueling, long interviews. So you need to have your endurance set.
Mm-hmm. Chris, is there anything that's a little bit different from when you're thinking about, like, does a liberal arts college want to see that your research is going to be very, you know, that you're going to be guiding it, less of a role of graduate students? Is there any of that one might want to
so I think the key is you have to convey, generally it's more common for liberal arts college, at liberal arts colleges and departments, when a position is open, it's more likely to be open subfield, or at least not very tightly constrained. And so it's there. My understanding is it tends to be less concern about the particular subfield of research, is that you can demonstrate you can be successful without graduate students and postdocs, or at least not local graduate students and postdocs. And that's definitely not true in all subfields. And so if you can't convey that you not only can be successful, but will want to pursue your research with undergraduates and with external collaborators and so on, then even if they think you can do exciting research, the department is probably not going to be convinced that you can be successful there. And of course, at an institution like mine, it's important that you want to engage the students. Even if you could be successful working on your own, it's important that you want to be successful doing that. And so, for example, I won't speak to how the interview process at Research University, but my interview process at liberal arts college is, there's a research talk, and then there was a teaching demonstration, generally speaking. And the research talk, I know that it was essential that I didn't give a standard seminar targeted at graduate students or postdocs who weren't in the room, or even targeting the faculty who probably weren't in my subfield, but it was important in my case to demonstrate that I could give a talk that was accessible to undergraduates. And so that was my focus in preparing, is that I'm going to give a research talk, but I want to believe that undergraduates, say a sophomore physics major, could follow at least 80 to 90% of my talk. And that's not something that traditionally when we give a talk is the case. And then there was also a teaching a demonstration as well, which depends on the institution. A lot of institutions there's no teaching demonstration, but those similar to mine, that was another component. But I think the main thing, again, is understand the institution, understand the focus of the department, and understand who the audience will be, whether it's the other faculty. Are you going to be speaking to faculty in your subfield, or are you going to be speaking to faculty in a variety of fields, or in a variety of subfields within physics? And do they expect you to be addressing, in say a research talk, do they expect you to be addressing the committee, or are you expected to be addressing graduate students or undergraduate students? And that's going to depend, somewhat department to department. But if you target your research talk totally wrong, even if it's a good talk for what it is, that may, put you in a challenging position because the committee is expecting, you to present your research in a different way. So.
Sounds good. Did you have other comments, Lucia? Yeah. Take out your notes.
Okay. So yeah. So in a job interview, I think there is one aspect that one should consider, and I know it's difficult, and the first N job interviews that I did, I obviously didn't know that. And so the main aspect that I could see at the time was that I was very intimidated, because there are all these people in front of me that are judging me and are deciding my future, whether I finally get this faculty position, which is the sacred graal of, since you start thinking I want to be a scientist, that's the recognition that somehow you made it, that maybe you're not an imposter, then comes back again later. And so all you're thinking about is, how can I impress these people that I deserve that? And that actually doesn't work. Because first of all, if you are getting interviewed, so if you're in a short list, they already have decided that you deserve that job. They don't call people to come just to hang out. So you are with other 3, 4, 5, 6 candidates, and you are all good. And they're not gonna choose over who marginally is a bit better in being a physicist. Also because unless you are doing exactly the same thing, these things are not comparable. It will not be, 100 citations more or less, or 1 or 2 points of H index that make the cut. Usually, then there are exceptions, but usually that is not the case. So what is that is important? You have to realize that these figures that are in front of you are actually not just judges. They are human beings that are making a very difficult choice. That is, we need to find a colleague that we are going to be with for 20 years more, who knows. And this is a trench. This is a trench during a war, because university is tough. It's tough for the students, it's tough for research, it's tough to get grants. We want somebody, who can work with us. And so the very best thing that you can do that nobody does is, it takes some effort. Do your homework in the sense that look who is in the department, actually read some of the stuff that they've done, but for real, not the abstract, okay? Read some of the stuff that they're done. Actually really summon the courage in you to find it interesting. No, it is interesting, but there is always a bit of cognitive panic when you see something that you don't know. And the first emotional response is, it's not interesting. So you need some courage to go through something that at the beginning never looks interesting, but then it is interesting. And when you do the interview and then you have all these private conversations with them, talk to them about them, not about you. They already know you're great. They already know you're strong. You don't need to impress them anymore. Talk about what you do. I have this question. They realize, hey, we can work with this guy. And actually, he's a nice fellow. He's not a self-centered person. This is somebody who can help us because, this job is tough and we need allies. And the same goes for teaching. I see many people that come and give us some speech about how teaching is important, and that's good. But I am really impressed when I see that some potential prospective colleague that I can see that actually does care about teaching, which means you can feel it the way he talks or she talks, that he's actually willing to, engage with the students, put some time with the students. Time is the resource. So if you see somebody who is generous with that, then we think, oh, this is the colleague I want to have, because this person is going to help me when I have a problem with a student, which is all the time, and have somebody on my side who is willing to, talk to the student or talk to me about the student and all of that. It is really a trench. And these people are actually not there to judge you. They're looking for a nice colleague. And if you realize that, it's going to make your interview less stressful, and they're going to like you more. So this is almost a silver bullet. This will work, except that now this thing goes online. Everyone sees that, and then it's not a silver. And then this potential advantage is lost because everyone.
So I'd view a physics department as a big group of collaborators in an ideal sense, and physicists are often very good at working together. And so if you're at a university working in an academic environment, we're collaborating on delivering programs, we're collaborating on teaching, we're collaborating on all this admin, and often we also have collaborators on grants. So it's interpersonal skills and communication, and you want those to come out in the interview.
Alex, in a situation where a lot of the course is online, how was your interview process different? Where did you have the interview online? What was different from that?
Yes, the interview was online. Everything is online. Everyone works remotely, so the interview was online. And just echoing what everyone else was saying, I think what was important is to demonstrate that you were a team player and that you were going to work effectively with other faculty, with the staff on other teams. I have to work closely with the engineers who design the class platform, with the student experience team who is on the ground with the students. So being an effective collaborator and team player is really important. If you can think about stories from your PhD or your other experiences to highlight that you can do that effectively, they would like to see that for sure.
Questions from you guys? Yep.
Okay. I want to hit you.
Throw it.
You talked about the importance of a lot of different skills, and particularly cultivating teaching and displaying some of those. Were there any other skills that you haven't talked about so far that were important to cultivate along the way, or make sure you displayed either on your application or in the interview process?
Do you want to take?
Well, for example, I did mention this earlier, but perhaps I'll go back to it, especially if you are interested in teaching. You might also try to demonstrate that you're just interested in how students learn. And so potentially getting some involvement in education research or showing some interest in pedagogy or the science of learning might help as well.
I'd say time management is super important. And in a job interview, so we always have a panel interview as part of the 1 or 2 day interview. And we usually will ask a question, for example, and this is going to be filmed, so I shouldn't be saying it, but imagine you have 6 days of work to do and 3 days to do it in. How do you manage? And so it's a question of figuring out how you prioritize, how do you always keep things moving forward. And this is something you can practice as a grad student because you do have lots of things you're juggling often. There's courses, research, you might be doing a TA. You may have other things in your life happening. And so juggling all of those things successfully can help you practice that. So your own personal focus, so when you get down to work, are you constantly checking your phone or is it put away and you're actually just focused on your research? Those are good things to practice.
Another skill that maybe you don't think of, but certainly does go along with teaching, is learning how to give constructive feedback and doing that in a meaningful way that will help students learn. So me and the other faculty at my institution, we are in constant communication about how to do this effectively. So that's something else to consider.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Okay.
Whoa.
All right.
There we go.
I'm gonna toss it back. So I don't know if this is the right time to ask the question, but it sort of fits with the whole time management thing. And my question was about work-life balance, and if you feel like your life is well balanced and with your work, or if it's more like your work has become your life and you're sort of like living your work and basically 24/7. And yeah, if you're, maybe this is mostly a question for Alioscia because he has what you would call like the quote unquote like classic academic path. And like, so I wanted to ask at some point if you were getting so frustrated during your academic path that you were thinking about alternatives outside of academia, and like what were the or if you just always just saw yourself being sort of like getting to the tenure track ultimately. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So this time I have to answer first, but yeah, yeah. So to answer the personal part first, there was a moment when I was about to finish my PhD where I thought about, I considered going to work in the industry, maybe for a bank. In that case, that type of consideration was mostly driven by, these fears that one has of not being good enough. But there are other reasons that one, might and should conceive why not to go into the academia. I'm going to explain this in a second. I'm just saying this was my own concern. So the thing is, and maybe some of you may disagree, but the way I see academia is that basically your work is your life in a way that I want to explain. And so there is this beautiful passage in The Human Condition by Hannah Arendt, where she takes advantage of the fact that English language has basically a duplicated vocabulary because Saxon words and Latin words. So there are two words that are called work and labor. And Hannah Arendt explains, labor is the type of activity that, using her words, that is the condition of a slave. And then she explained that that condition has nothing to do with how much power you have or how much money you make, but if it is a time and effort that you use simply because you survive. Whether that survival means that you buy a boat or just merely surviving is the same thing. You only do it for practical purposes, and it's part of, of not your life. It's actually time that is taken away from you, and then your life starts, right? And many people, are in some line of work which feels like that, right? Their life starts at 5 p.m., right? And all that happened between 9 and 5 is felt like they've taken my time, and that's a very alienating condition. Now, when it comes to and then Hannah Arendt says, work is is what you live in the world. Is always something that you do that belongs to you. So this is the way I see academia. It is true that academia and science has this kind of invasive behavior that follows you everywhere. You never really finish, right? You're never really off. Maybe you are, taking a shower and you're thinking about the problem. And when is that you are not working, or when is that you're working? It's from an external observer, I never work, right? Unless I'm in class, that's work. And sometimes everyone here that is doing a postdoc or is a graduate student that is doing research has this experience that is invading all your time, and sometimes it's a bit stifling. But actually, unless one really exaggerates, that is the sign that is also your life. That is time that always belongs to you. You take it with you, It's not something that you do just to get some money. So you really live the condition of the free man or of the free woman because you do that type of work. And that is typical of most creative jobs, not only of creative jobs. Also, teaching is like that. You do something that you recognize is in the world, that is left in the world. It's not just that they took your time. So I think this consideration is very important. If you choose to be a scholar, you should see life this way. That you should be ready to accept the fact that mostly your work is not just something that you do, but it is also your life.
Yeah.
I don't know if you answered your question. But that's the way I see it.
Can I add in? So I have a small child, and I am not the absent-minded academic mother who's not there. I'm actually there a lot of the time. But because I can bring my ideas in my mind with me, I can also think about them at the park or taking my son in the jogging stroller on a run. I can be very engaged in what I'm doing, but all of a sudden I figured out a new way to do a calculation. So I think we're smart people. We can balance lots of things. We can use our intelligence to balance lots of things and not have this job take over our life in the sense that you become a slave to your computer or to teaching lectures. It's use your creativity to juggle all these different demands and still have the other parts of your life that you want, going skiing.
Sure. Any last questions from the audience? Okay. Well, maybe to close up our session, as I've been doing in the other sessions, I'll let you guys give any final tips or remarks, thinking back to students who might be, and postdocs who might be thinking maybe of starting that first application or looking for institutions that might be the right fit. We weren't able to kind of cover all of those, the questions that we had. So if you could think back to that time in your life, if you could have done something differently, or if you have some great advice to impart, please. Alioscia, should we start at this end this time? Yeah, instead of starting back over there.
So, all that could be publicly said, I said. I'm around. You can talk to me when we are off the record. I'll tell you more stuff.
Okay. I'll be sure to send him out to the coffee machine so you can find him. Yes.
Oh, I know so much good advice has already been said. I might just say be honest about, I know there's a lot of graduate students in the crowd, so be honest about why you are a graduate student. What do you want to get out of your PhD? Do you want to pursue a faculty job? Do you just want the title of PhD? Do you think it's an employable degree? Is it just a good time where you get to travel and do some fun research? And start thinking about what exactly you want to get out of the PhD. I think we've been hearing today about all the necessary skills that you're going to need in the real world. So what can you do now to try to gain some experience in those areas and try to get those skills? And I think it also helps not to only be honest with yourself, but to be honest with your PhD supervisor and to let them know what your intentions are, and hopefully they can help as well. And remember that you can kind of customize your PhD to get out of it what you want. I know we're talking about faculty positions and teaching, but I know that other students have kind of taken a semester off to go do an internship at a consulting firm or at a financial institution. So you can try to do that while still maintaining your student status as well.
So I give 3 pieces of advice. So find what you love, no guts, no glory, and embrace the pain. So find what you love. I mean that in all aspects of your life. You don't have to get sucked into the vortex of a black hole in academia, which is not a black hole, but find what you love in all the different parts and then inch your way in that direction. And that can mean all sorts of things to different people, and you shouldn't feel constrained to follow a particular path. It's just a path. No guts, no glory. There are going to be lots of leaps along the way. So I tried different things and did different things, and then sometimes had to change paths. But I had the guts to go for it, and I'm where I am today because I did. And I'm very happy with my work and my life balance. And then embrace the pain. There will be challenges along the way. So if you can find a way to work through it and develop your personal resilience, that's going to be good for all of your life. So 3 things: find what you love, no guts, no glory, and embrace the pain.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I guess echoing a little bit of what's already been said, but so I think one thing that has been discussed a lot today is there certainly are a lot of benefits to pursuing an academic career. Obviously, many of us made those choices, and for many of you, you're hearing from advisors and mentors and who've made choices to pursue that career. But there are also, as we've heard earlier, lots of reasons to pursue other non-academic careers. And the flip side of that is also there's a lot of reasons why pursuing an academic career, is challenging or not so great. Geographic flexibility is something that we rarely get in an academic career. I think there's a lot of career paths where you can say, I want to live in this city, and I'll find a job in that city. That's very, challenging to do in an academic career path. And when you have partners and families, that sort of thing it makes things very challenging. So there's certainly great reasons to pursue academics. There are great reasons to pursue other things. But I would just keep in mind that when you're in the academic environment, you're probably mostly going to hear one side, and so try to do your best to filter out what aspects of what you're hearing make you want to pursue that, and what aspects are you just sort of hearing people who've already made a decision and already made a lot of compromises telling you that their life choice was the best, which is so that's something I would keep in mind. But if you do decide to at least continue pursuing an academic career or think about one, then I would just think about what aspects of it are you motivated by? Are you really motivated by the research and want to pursue a position that's as research focused as possible? Then keep in mind what sort of academic positions will allow you to do that. If you really value the teaching and want to pursue a teaching only type position, you can seek out those sorts of positions, and if you're somewhere in the middle, you can. There are positions, that fall anywhere in that range. So I would really just think about what are you motivated by, and then what sort of academic position would fit your passions. And then, of course, if you decide your passions lay elsewhere, don't hesitate to pursue passions outside of academic route as well.
Great. Okay, let's thank our panelists again.